Tonight, continuing Rick and Ibrahim's egotistical adventure, our review, our commemorative series on 500 episodes, a 10-year journey. We've had stops, we've had starts, abrupt endings, slow beginnings, quick beginnings, all of it, slow burns. We're starting, I believe it's the 5th episode of this series. We may go to fucking 10. We've done 10 episodes of different things in the past. Whatever it takes to cover this ground, we're going to do it. We're going to jump right in, going through episodes, discussing, remembering, having nostalgia. Some things I think we'd rather forget, but more, there are things that we'd rather remember, and we're going to talk about those things and bring you with us to remind you of what we've done, the legacy, the vault. Watch this with RickRamos.libsyn.com. We left off at episode 219 from 2019. The Joker. You brought in Mike Black, and you guys talked about the Joker, which keeps coming up, and it's going to keep coming up. The Joker's one of those characters that lives.
Well, that's the thing. Cinema has this ability to create great villains, but also to give greater form to villains that exist. And with the Joker, at least, I don't know when he made his first appearance. I can't even remember the episode too well, but I can't remember when the Joker made his first appearance in the Batman comics. But when he did, it became such a it captured the hearts and minds, because there was a certain level of charm and charisma in a character like that, and then portrayed by earliest I can remember, Cesar Romero, Jack Nicholson in my youth, into Heath Ledger and Mark Hamill with the voice in some of the cartoons. I mean, it's a character that I think a lot of actors would just sink their teeth into and really go to strange, dark places. I know that when Heath Ledger did the character, I think there were some reports that Nicholson spoke to him after and told him that it was going to be a difficult time getting out of the character, which I don't know, you speak to as an actor. You have to come to, like, in order to make the character believable, captivating, and memorable. Sometimes you have to go to really dark places, and sometimes you got to let it take control of you. You know, we talked a little bit about Bob Hoskins during the making of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, having to really take time, I think almost a year, to get it out of his head of imagining cartoon characters around him, because in order to sell that performance, he actually had to see those characters in his daily life, and it became kind of like a psychosis to him. I imagine that if the Joker is done correctly, it would probably have the same effect on Heath Ledger, Nicholson, and later on Jared Leto. But Jared Leto has other problems. Joaquin Phoenix, I could see. Yeah, this is a character that just keeps coming back, and apparently he's coming back in a summer film this year, I think. I'm not sure when the new Joker film is scheduled to drop, but I don't know. I'm gonna be interested. I'm interested.
Yeah, I mean, that's when Chicano gangsters take up that name, Joker, Little Joker. You know, it's smile now, cry later, I guess. You know,
it has a hold on both the culture and the history of cinema and everything. So it's like it's there. It's comparable to a lot of things.
Food.
Yeah, exactly.
Being able to stick your tongue out at the king, you know. Um, Game of Thrones,
Yeah,
episode 222.
222.
That
No,
was
221.
Sorry, 221. Was and that was late. You know, it wasn't from the beginning of the show. It was like catching up, and then
Yeah, I think we started during the fifth season. What did it go? Six or seven seasons, because we came at it in the fifth season, I think it was, and we were anticipating the sixth and seventh. And I don't know that I've ever been as disappointed with the way a thing unfolds. But that's more of a problem of the producers and the imaginations behind a project like that. But it was a really great. Number one, I thought it was a really fun talk. I thought it was a really good examination of myth making and world creation and everything that went into it: sex, violence, blood, and guts. But for me, it was also just the examination of how things can go so wrong when you don't have a clear focus of how something is supposed to both end and get to that ending. So those first few episodes were a hell of a good time, and I think by the end of that series that we did, there was the realization that it was a failed whole. What do you remember of it?
Well, it ended up being a two-part. It was 221 and 223. And it was kind of like the show, the basis of it, the history of it, the lore, kind of historical analogs, where George R. R. Martin, the creator, the writer behind the show, the novelist behind the show, what he took from in terms of like historical, War of the Roses and other kind of cultural and historical prompts, and filled in the blanks and did, this is Richard III, but we're making it this, and how he created the world, and then now how HBO and the showrunners turn that into season after season of this big fucking soap opera. And this fantasy thing with actual languages that were created. That was the build-up, and then getting to the finale, which everyone had like their theories, everyone was involved, what's going to happen next, and then to see the way it was kind of like, it seemed it was so large, and then it seemed to be kind of just rushed. And there were some things that made sense, and there were some things that it was kind of like, this felt a little bit like disappointing because of the wrap up, and to understand that how difficult it was for them to do that, and like, do we care? Do we know how difficult it was, because it's like they're working on material where they've already passed the books, and now he has to give them storylines, and he's giving them, this is where it's going to go. You guys can change and fill in whatever. How do they do that? And how do you get so much into a series? And what are the next steps? So we got to see that whole process. And overall, I think it was still worth the watch. And
it was definitely worth the watch. But
the House of Dragons.
You've been watching it?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I haven't bothered. So it was like, I didn't want to take that right. Well, that's the thing, though. It's like, but it gets to another aspect of committing yourself to a series that you have to wonder what's going to be the payoff. I mean, there's so few hours in the day. You work an 8-hour day. I work an 8-hour day. We have lives on the sides. We have family and relationships that need to be attended to. And I'm not saying that in like a, oh shit, I got to do this kind of thing. But there is an aspect of, do I have time to dedicate to something that has already disappointed me? So, I guess the Game of Thrones experience was rewarding enough for you to want to go back to it. For me, I don't see that. So it's like,
well, I'm looking at process.
Yeah.
To me, it's kind of like, it's not about whether it's going to pay off. It's like, do I like it as I'm enjoying it, as I'm watching it?
Okay.
And I do. And then in between, I'm anticipating like, fuck, who's going to die next week? So even if we get to an end and I'm just kind of like, okay, the same thing happened that happened over there, would it still have been worth it? Yes, because every week I enjoyed it, even though that last week I may not have enjoyed it. So I guess it's kind of like, there's a big picture kind of like pot of gold at the end of the rainbow way to look at it, but there's also the kind of like weekly, it's not like, if you and I were to hang out and go to dinner, let's say we had dinner or lunch or whatever, or coffee, every month. It's not like I'm going to say, well, what's going to happen? Like, what's the payoff of fucking hanging out with my friend? There's no payoff. You're just hanging out with your friend. So that's an alternative way to look at it. But from there, we went into Deadwood.
Well, I was going to say that it's like the contrast is going from something that is maybe it's foolish, maybe it's like looking for a lost love or a first love, but I kind of want the Deadwood experience again, and sadly I know that I can never have it because I don't know if I'll ever get anything as good as Deadwood, and I don't know if I will ever be as wowed by something like Deadwood. 2003, Deadwood dropped in 2003 and was on for 3 seasons. I watched it from, I think, probably the beginning of the second season. And I watched the first season from the beginning of the third season, or the second season, because back then I would, you still had physical media. So they would release shit at the end of the year, right before the beginning of the new season. And I would buy that, and I would tear through it. And I remember watching that, and after I got through my initial problems with the series, which was about language, being able to really, I don't know if you'll agree with this, but Deadwood is not the kind of show that you can just watch in the background, and it's not the kind of thing that you can have other shit going on. You can't be really surfing the internet and watch Deadwood. You have to really be paying attention to what they're saying to each other, because there's a rhythm to the language, and there's a archaic nature to the language that makes it impossible for it to be just a side note in whatever you're doing that day.
It's stylized. It's very
stylized. Ornate. But like when I got into it, I mean, I was all about Deadwood. I mean, it was great. I still think it's the greatest show that I've ever seen produced for television, and I think it's something that I go back to a number of times because there's something about the world that it created that for me was a little bit more. Maybe because it's not based in fantasy, it's based in historical fiction, and a historical fiction that is not really that far from us. I mean, 1880? It was,
I don't know.
It was the end of
some point.
Well,
I don't know where it is, but it's fucking it's Wild West post.
It's the Wild West post Civil War.
Or is it post Civil War?
No, it is post Civil War.
Is it?
It is. It is because they mention the war a number of times. It's Civil War was 61 to 65, so I think this movie was around 68, 69, somewhere around there. And then 13 years later, they would do the follow-up movie, which we're going to get into as well. But I just remember that being one of those I just remember that being one of those movie, television, narrative watching experiences where at least I was pulled in and couldn't see anything else. I mean, it was Deadwood. It was for the praise that is thrown on The Sopranos and The Wire, Breaking Bad, a number of the films that came in, a number of the shows that came during and after. There was a real revolution in television, in long form television, that I think reached its peak with Deadwood. I just think there was something about that with the commentary that it was making on today's society was very powerful. It was very vibrant, and I just remember thinking, wow, this is there's nothing else like this on TV. There's nothing else even being attempted to this degree of brutal honesty, and I loved it. I missed that. Part of the problem that I had with jumping into a series again is I don't know if I want to dedicate myself to something that's not going to have that kind of impact.
You have to be willing to be disappointed. You have to fucking take the risk.
Yeah, you do, but you also have to understand that something can start off beautifully and then deteriorate because the people behind the money, the people behind the production, are doing everything they can to make it last as long as possible. I'll give you a perfect example. Showtime's Shameless, which was a show that I was a big fan of for the first probably 5 or 6 seasons. But then there is a point where it becomes repetitive and it becomes tiring, and you feel like they're just going back over old roads that are not being paved, they're not being improved upon, you're not developing things. And I think that's one of the brilliance of Deadwood, that regardless of what the intention was for that show to move on to 4 or 5 seasons, the fact that it ended in 3, and I thought ended beautifully for the story that it was telling. And Milch would talk about the meaning of endings because he had ideas that would have gone on for another 3 or 4 seasons, but there was something about endings, and he was talking about how nothing ends. No story really ends. It just the story might end, but there's no finality. You understand what I mean? Where it's like, these people, this movie ends here, but their lives go on tomorrow. They wake up, they get into new situations, new problems, and that might not be necessarily something worth producing.
Sure. I mean, like, that's it's on the one hand, it sounds like somewhat, I guess, profound, but on the other hand, it sounds fairly obvious. It's kind of like, we assume that people, it's like, well, someone's story begins when they're born, but Game of Thrones says not so. The Targaryen story begins way the fuck back here.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it's kind of like, well, what chapter are we looking at, right?
Mm-hmm.
When a star is born, and I don't mean like DeGrasse Tyson star. I mean like a fucking. I mean, yeah, like
a Barbara Streisand,
like a Barbara Streisand or something like that. It's like, is that star born? The path of Donald Trump, like as a politician, begins when he comes down that escalator.
Yeah,
it doesn't begin being born in Queens. That's the prequel. And the meaning of endings. It's like Joe Biden's term, whenever it ends, it ended in that debate. We know that Joe Biden will live on whatever, but it's like, but the the pivotal moment is this, and it's like, do we see what happens after? Does it matter, or is this where this is kind of like the end of that? You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
the meaning of endings, and also the unique thing about, if you contrast these shows, it's like, how is the material developed? So George R. R. Martin wrote these books, but he has like all like these deep, detailed aspects to his work that had to be adapted into script form, so it didn't start off as made to be on TV. It was made to be read, and it's basically, in its own way, it's historical fiction, but with dragons, right?
Yeah. Would you call that historical fantasy fiction? I mean,
I think
you could look at it like that.
It's just, sure, but I mean, fantasy is so much about that anyway, and even like medieval writing and medieval legends and all that themselves are fucking like a version of that, where they take histories and they create these legends about shit.
Yeah.
But the idea of Milch lying down on his side and kind of talking his way through, dialoguing his way through these stories, not fucking having like an outline, not knowing where it's gonna go, and he has like assistant writers kind of like just jotting down what he's saying, and they're working through it, or they're helping him work through it. That's a different thing than what we see on TV. Like, it's rooms with writers fucking throwing back shit, like going back and forth, and kind of like manufacturing plots and manufacturing stories in order to arrive at stuff that's going to keep people watching. And a lot of the stuff is good. Some of the stuff fucking isn't. It's in the same way that like a James Patterson works with writers to have a factory of fucking plots that's going to keep people turning the page. Okay, this is how long the chapter needs to be. Stop here. People turning. Okay, now they're hooked to the next one. And the next thing you know, the book's over, and it's like, oh shit, okay, the book's over. Well, next book, you know? So it's different. So aside from, the tragedy of David Milch's condition, and his decline, it's like the nature of the creation itself made if the piece wasn't unique enough, the way that it was created was unique.
Yeah.
And so that's not something that is going to be seen ever again. Not in that way, because there's only one David Milch.
Yeah, we're lucky to have had him. I mean, you see his fingerprints all over, and if you watch early episodes of Hill Street Blues, that's not a show that I remember too well. He wrote on that. NYPD Blue. The beginning of that series, the first 4 seasons probably, are very Milch driven, and the show itself loses its way. But it's a testament that it would go on for another 6 or 7 years because of the power of what he created. That the foundation was solid and something that you could look at and you could build from. That was a good show. It was a really good show until it lost its way, which is to say, until it lost David Milch as the showrunner. But he's a fascinating character. I've started to read his autobiography, and it's fascinating. His years as a writer, a student. I think he went to Yale. Did he go to Yale? Yeah, I think he went to Yale. And his gambling and heroin addictions. I mean, this guy is a textbook case of how to fuck up, and it's beautiful reading his shit. So, I think when he passes, which you haven't heard a lot from him, and that was, my God, that was 4 or 5 years ago that we did that. He has to be in the deep throes of Alzheimer's by this point. And that's another aspect where you start to wonder, it's like a man who was so dependent on his memory and his ideas and his ability to create these worlds and the characters within him, to lose that control of his mind. That's incredibly depressing to me. I don't know how that plays into your view of it, but it's
terrifying to me.
Yeah. I mean, that is a terrifying aspect of, you and I are both at the age when we have to start wondering about elders that we will be responsible of caring for. And every time you see them break down, it's a reminder of your future. That's, I guess, maybe.
I mean, we're seeing that on a national level at this point.
Yeah, we are seeing that.
I mean, that's as we speak, and I'm bringing politics into it because this is about
you always do.
The relevance. Well, the thing is that it's like the whole point of what we're doing is like, why are we looking back, and how is the past reflecting now, and how is now reflecting the past?
Well, I've always said that this is the kind of what we do here. We are examining a medium that is both influenced and influencing of the culture that we live in, and politics is a major aspect of that. So, yeah, this shit, I mean, I make fun, but at the same time, I take the things that I see, the fictionalized entertainment that I see on TV, parallel to the actual events going on in our life, and I look at them with that weight of how they affect one another. It's frightening. It really is frightening to see. It's frightening to be in a situation where you're looking at, do I vote for an insane, dementia-ridden, dementia-addled moron, or a career politician in the throes of what could possibly be dementia? I mean, I
won't even go as far as to say that it's that. I just think that it's just the aspect of him being, at the very least, it's just Joe Biden is at this point, he's too old, and you can either look at the line. I think people will say, well, look at what he did these last 4 years. And it's like, okay, fine. Number one, it's like, look at it. It's like, how does it feel? How does the average person like perceive it? Which shit's expensive. And they're going to blame the president, regardless of who it is. You can look at the trajectory as a straight line, which it's kind of like, no, that's not the way it's going to work. You can look at the trajectory as a curved line, and the curve is going down because that's what happens with age. The curve goes up, and it's a fucking bell, and the curve goes down.
At the end of the day, ultimately, it's not going to. This is the best he's going to be, and it's not going to get better than this. So it can only get worse. And anybody who doesn't see that, anybody who doesn't see that is bullshitting themselves. But for someone who won't step down to the alternative,
right. Yeah. So from that uplifting position of many things in Deadwood and Lies Agreed Upon and the Game of Thrones and Chaos is a Ladder, we got to, in June of 2019, it was the 1 year anniversary of Anthony Bourdain's death. So we looked at aspects of the final season, and kind of put an epilogue on the first episode that we had done. The first episode on Bourdain that we had done. It was kind of like I put together like a tasting, basically, of different episodes and aspects of Bourdain that dealt with cinema, his love of cinema, and then this one was kind of like it was this epilogue, and it was a look at kind of what was his legacy, and what was
the appeal.
What did he leave us with? What was his aesthetic? I remember describing it as a punk rock aesthetic, and so it was this like poignant kind of like return, and I still think with Roadrunner there's still more to talk about with him that's come out since, etc.
Well, there's always with somebody who has an effect on an effect on the cultural zeitgeist the way he did. If you look at it so many years later, you're always going to be faced with this idea of where are we now? What has happened since? And with Bourdain, it's kind of Bourdain really did. My favorite thing about Bourdain was his ability to go into a place and just sit there and absorb it and allow it to tell its own story. And that's something that you don't see a lot of in these travel shows or these cooking shows or these people who go to different places to bring these worlds to us. Bourdain did that, but he did that in such a way as to allow the people who were living it to tell their story. And that's, I think that's the fundamental difference between a Bourdain and someone like a Gordon Ramsay or Guy Fieri or some of these other people who
impose their shit on the place.
Yeah. Bourdain was a real student of culture and the world, and he wanted to understand, and he knew that the best way to understand something is to shut up, sit back, and listen to people tell their stories. And somewhere in that you'll find the truth. And I think that's the thing that made him so beautiful. I think that's the thing that really pulled him out of the fry houses and the Sunday morning brunch service, and made it possible for him to really captivate people, because he was the quintessential everyman. You can say Jimmy Stewart, you can say Tom Hanks in these character roles that they played, but Anthony Bourdain was nothing more than himself. And you could always argue.
Go ahead.
What I was going to say is, you can always argue that by putting a camera on somebody, a performance is created, and there is something unnatural about it. But there are still those who retain a greater amount of their individuality and the truth of who they are. And maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm a little bit romantic about it, but as I watch Anthony Bourdain, and I go back to it every once in a while, I'll go back to his episodes, and I'll watch things that he's done, or I'll hear these little talks that he gives, that pop up on YouTube all the time. There was something genuine, there was something truthful, and I'm willing to sell out to an Anthony Bourdain in a way that I won't sell out to a lot of these other people. He's somebody that I believed in, and I was really late in coming to that party, but I'm so glad that I got there, and I'm so glad that we had a chance to really sit down and talk about him. I thought it was a very meaningful episode.
I mean, it's authenticity, and that always wins. It always wins, because everyone wishes, and that's the thing. Like, on the one hand, you can say he's the everyman, but on the other hand, it's like he's not, because he's Anthony Bourdain. He's himself, and there's an aspect to him that it was like, well, he's also fucking cool. And I mean cool as in like the aesthetic of coolness, but at the same time he was also just like chill, as in a cool person. Like that person's like this down to earth and cool.
Yeah.
And the performative aspect of it, it was kind of like if you watch early stuff, you can see the nervousness in the interviews, the awkwardness.
Mm-hmm.
And then as he got used to being out there, you could see that with the performance, because it was always like, there was the bravado, but there was always a wink at the camera that said, "Hey, I know I'm kind of full of shit, like, and you do too. Let's just roll with this." And that was also endearing. So with the performance, it was like he was learning to perform to be more himself. So there's like a paradox there, but at the same time, it's kind of like he didn't have to pretend, even though on some level, up until the final day, there was probably a lot, as with all of us. There's shit that we're not revealing because you can't. But there was a level of like learning to really be himself in front of the camera and not just what he maybe in his head thought that he should be or whatever.
Yeah.
So his thing is very much this. What got him famous is Kitchen Confidential,
Mm-hmm.
about revealing the fucking secrets of the kitchen. And if you haven't read that, if you're not familiar, it's an easy, quick, fun fucking read. He gives these dirty inside secrets. It's kind of like gossipy. It's interesting, and like it's kind of like one of the things, and this is a paraphrase, but it's kind of like, here's a secret for you. Cooks cut themselves a lot. It's blood, guts, cum, literally. Like, it's interesting. So from there, we went to Jim Henson, Kermit the Frog.
Mm-hmm. That had to be a high point for you.
Blood, Sex, and Cum to the Muppet movie, the 40th anniversary, episode 231. It's interesting. It's just fucking different. It's just
Well, for me, it's the Muppets have okay. So when I was a kid, these movies were debuting, so I was seeing them as a kid. So that has a psychological resonance with you 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. It's not going to go away. There's a sense of nostalgia, but as I've gotten older, I see more than simply puppets. I see more than simply a children's tale of going for something that you love. There's a lot more that what makes them, and I said this in the episode, what makes the Muppets so important 40 years later, 45 years later now, is the humanity. To be able to imbue human emotions and sensitivity, curiosity, sadness, desire, and insecurity to these characters, I think it's overwhelming. And when you watch them, I to this day, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I stand by it. I don't watch these movies like they're puppets. I watch them like they're real. I'm able to suspend that disbelief. Kermit the Frog is a real creature. He's a real character that can move around like that. It's a testament to the skills of the puppeteer and their acting ability. I mean, they're manipulating the movements of this puppet, and then with the voice, they're bringing a certain level of humanity into it. And if you watch that movie, and if you I think if you look at it from the angle that I'm looking at it,
mm-hmm.
you give a greater there's a greater understanding of the acting involved. And then you'll go back to Looney Tunes, you'll go back to Disney, you'll go back to any of these animated creations, Pixar, and you'll see the level that is needed in order to, the skill that is needed to imbue these characters with human emotions, which are what connects us to the emotion of the film. You even look at something like WALL-E, which is mostly silent for the first hour. It doesn't matter that it's silent. There's a those beeps, those boops, those whatever sounds that those two robots are making, they convey emotion. And I think there's a point where you, in order to truly embrace animation and enjoy it, you kind of have to turn off that part of your brain that says this is not real. I mean, you have to do that with anything in cinema. Cinema is letting go of what you know to be true and going with what you want to be. We talked a little bit about this during the Die Hard episode that we did about 4 weeks ago, where it was, is this realistic or is it believable? Well, of course it's not really realistic, but within the context of the story that is being told, it's believable. And I think that's one of the things about movies, that if you love movies, you're really able to let go of whatever intellectual prejudices you might have going in, whatever artistic or intellectual prejudice you have. So when you watch the Muppet movie, which you had never seen before this, right?
I don't know. I think I remember more about Jim Henson's death than I do about any of these other characters or any of this stuff. But that's just how I am.
Yeah. Well, you didn't grow up with the show. You didn't grow up with the movies.
I remember the Muppet Babies.
Yeah.
I remember that.
I remember that too.
But it wasn't so. Even Sesame Street is not, or Mr. Rogers is not. That's not. It wasn't something that I was like super. When I think of my childhood, I don't, and I'm not kind of geared to think of it in that. Like I probably could have watched it, but it's like that's not really like what I think about.
Yeah.
As that's not what I connect with my childhood.
Sure.
And I wasn't. I did watch like Saturday morning cartoons and shit like that, but it wasn't Sesame Street. It wasn't the Muppets. Although yes, they were present, but it wasn't like that. So I don't have that same nostalgic childhood connection with those. For example, yesterday I was at work and mom texted me that the guy who was the kid on Alf died in Arizona.
Yeah.
Fell asleep in his car apparently, in that fucking heat, and he died. And it's like, oh shit, Alf, you know? And I remember Alf, even though I don't connect Alf as like this fucking childhood totem for me either, but like, it's just one of those things that like, obviously Kermit the Frog is more iconic and Phineas Piggy, they're more iconic than fucking Alf. They're just kind of part of this. In my mind, if you open up the closet, there's all these fucking characters, including E.T., hiding amongst them from the 80s that are just kind of thrown in there. And I understand, like, this is the late 70s, but it's just kind of all in there together in my brain. So I don't have that same kind of like pull. I just don't. But I think it's interesting and cool, and that someone could take a puppet and turn it into this. It's a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a person. It's exactly it.
And that's crazy. Where Kermit is, yes, he's a creature, but it's also like, yeah, but he's a creature with all these other elements, and it's like, well, for all intents and purposes, Kermit's a person. He's not a man, but he's a male person, and Miss Piggy is a female person. And they're in love. You know what I mean? Like, and she's crazy. You know, I know that much. You know what I mean? And like, yeah, I know that. So it's interesting to see something that represents, whether it's your childhood or my childhood or anyone's, the fact that it represents that, and then to have gone back and it's like 40 years later, and at that point, that project, that entity of the Muppets was as old as me. So there's this like parallel thing. There's all these made up people just like me, this made up fucking person, and we're all just fucking Muppets somehow. That's very strange, but it's cool. And so to go back and to look at something that I wasn't really like related to, but like parallel with, to look at that, and then now going back to that, it's like, wow, like that's crazy. And I remember the late 80s, early 90s when, I don't know why I kind of put in my brain, I think about like, it was like within maybe from 89 into 90 or however it worked, but I remember like Lucille Ball, Sammy Davis Jr., and Jim Henson. I have their deaths kind of like lumped in together to me, even though I'm sure they were months apart. I don't think they were like the same week, but that we would have to look that up. But I just think of their deaths like being in the same kind of time period. So it's weird how that works, you know?
It is weird. It's very weird.
From there, we did episode 232, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino's take on kind of the relationship between a star, his friend, his stuntman friend, placed in the context of the summer of '69, and the Manson murders. Super interesting to me because it's just the Manson stuff, the Manson murders, and that aspect of crime history. And I don't think I'm done talking about that story or Charles Manson, and I still think there are things to be watched and talked about. But that was another one that was interesting to think about how certain episodes, you know, that and Woodstock, and later, and to a lesser extent, Altamont, are things that, you know, 50 years pass, and it's like people are still fucking, it still comes up. People still talk about it.
Yeah.
And when Charles Manson died, there wasn't really that much talk about him. It's just more like the phenomenon of it. In the same way that when what were you gonna say?
No, it's just something like you cast a pall over a time period, and you exact a certain, what do you call it? You just put a haze over it. What Manson was, whether it was him alone or was a combination of so many things that were coming to an end, it was a period where people were waking up to the dangers in the world. But it was also a danger that was being exaggerated on TV. It goes back to the it leads mentality of news media. So you scare the shit out of people in order to keep them watching the news. I mean, because realistically, how dangerous was the Manson family? Well, they were dangerous to the people that they affected, of course. But was this an army of crazies running around Los Angeles killing people on a weekly basis? How many of them were there? In the bigger picture, I think it's one of those periods where you start to see the changing of the culture and embracing the fears that would manifest later with Patty Hearst, then Richard Ramirez with the Night Stalker killings. I think in the same way that we like being scared from movies and horror movies in specific, we kind of like that in our news and in our everyday existence, because it fulfills some kind of adrenaline rush within us. I don't know if you agree with that.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
It's exciting. It's exciting to have a narrative of like the good versus evil, and especially in our culture has that, where it's like it's really the knight in shining armor versus the demon or the dragon or whatever it is, you know what I mean? And then if you throw in a blonde victim, it really spices it up. You know, we talked about that with Jaws. We've talked about that with fucking Carrie, and it's kind of and what the media was doing it with when there was the Gabby Petito stuff where she was missing, and they came out with this. They said it's the missing white girl syndrome, and they were like, how many African American women disappear? How many, trans women disappear? Blah blah. Or
well, if you really want to comment, how many Native women go missing on reservations?
Yeah.
Oh, did you say Native? I didn't hear. I thought you said.
You cut me off.
Oh well, I apologize.
I just said so.
We were going after the same target. We got hungry.
No, we're stumbling over one another, like trying to make that point. Who's more woke?
Yeah.
No, but seriously,
no, I know.
Yeah, all of that. So the point that these commentators were making was that, of course, in the same way that there's this theory that there's a theory about the idea that more serial killers were white.
Yeah.
And white males. And it's like, well, not necessarily, this theory says, because according to this, killers tend to kill within their own ethnic group. And and on the one side, you would think, well, more of the like non-white killers would get like the blame. It's actually the victims. You have more white victims that are getting more attention.
Yeah. And
because they're getting more attention, that leads to the white perpetrator. So it's an interesting. It's all. It's media. It's and this is going back to your point of like. If it bleeds, it leads. The scare tactics, and the thing is, how dangerous were they? Well, I mean, like, if they can kill these fucking Hollywood stars, can't they kill anyone? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
If they can go into someone's house, they can go into anyone's house. And beyond that, it's like, what does it represent? This represents like fuck. Like, this is the 60s, and this is the end of it. This is like, it has the sex, it has the glamour, the Hollywood aspect, it has the Roman Polanski's fucking the scandal that he brought upon himself.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, this is now just, oh, this is the guy who did Rosemary's Baby, and so you have larger cultural signs that you can say, oh, this represents that, and you have these cults, and you have aspects of what is there Eastern religion involved in this, or it's hippies and it's killer hippies and doom buggies and the desert and the end of the world and Black Panthers and fucking it's all this stuff that comes to represent the era. And then so now historians can say, well, this is the end of the 60s. I mean, is it the end of the 60s? You know, the meaning of endings, right?
Yeah.
But it's might as well have been. You know what I mean? And then by the time you get to Altamont, it's kind of like, well, yeah, a black guy dies and Hell's Angels are beating the shit out of people while the Rolling Stones play Give Me Shelter. You know what I mean? Like, it's a big thing. And Tarantino rewrites the history in a way that it's like, okay, well, supposedly the badass stuntman saves the day. Okay, in the same way that he beat Hitler in his other movie. And okay, that's cool. I fine, but at the time when we recorded this episode, kind of and I'm giving the fucking punchline away, but it was probably like one aspect was, well, that's not, and it's not the fact that I don't have a problem with that it's not real. It's just that, like, the ending that Tarantino gave is not even, and I'm going to be kind of crass in the way of, like, just look at this in terms of, like, a story, not as not actual lives, and then we can insert the value of the lives. Just in terms of the story, it's like, well, the more powerful story is actually the true story, because they are real lives that were lost. There was a price to pay. But for what? Was it because of Manson's failed music career? Was it because of Helter Skelter and he wanted to start a race war? You know what I mean? Like, those answers are gonna, you know, there are theories that he was like the product of a CIA like mind control thing, and so it's why that's what people want to know. Why did this have to happen? That's, to me, way more interesting than a stuntman kills Tex Watson, beats the shit out of him, the fucking cool dog that we're invariably more worried about the dog than the human beings in the movie, because that's kind of like how it works. Tarantino did something, okay, Brad Pitt is interesting in the film, but that aspect of the film to me is not as interesting as what actually happened, and the questions that we're left with. So ultimately, good movie, but this is still also this is a certain aspect of Tarantino's career that has taken him to the place it's taken him.
Well, that's kind of the problem that I had with the movie as well, but also I didn't consider it a good movie. I thought it was a decent movie. What I thought it was great performances.
And a great recreation of that era.
Oh, absolutely. It was beautiful. It was incredible to see. And we were both living in LA. So we're looking at Hollywood Boulevard. We're looking at that drive into the valley. We're looking at, he really went out of his way. And he's a nostalgic filmmaker. He lives for a past. I can't fault him for that, because it's a lot of who I am. But I'm in agreement with you where it's the real story is the more interesting story. He is for as much as he doesn't want to admit himself to be, he is a popular filmmaker, which is to say he's interested in giving. He'll say that he likes to subvert the genre and kind of beat the shit out of his audience in a way, and do with them what he wants. But he's not a De Palma. He's not a Scorsese. He's not a director who is trying to go for truth. He is going for something that is going to there's a fast food aspect to what Tarantino does. You enjoy it, it's a good time, but I don't know if it's as filling or fulfilling afterwards, with the exception of a handful of projects here and there. But for the most part, it's just I feel like most of his filmmaking, most of his filmography is a cheat. He's just not an honest filmmaker. There's not I don't think the stakes are as high with what he does in contrast to other filmmakers. Does that make sense? Am I?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple things that we can explore that further, which we will do. I don't want to pick apart everything that you're saying, but I mean, like, there's certain things like, okay, honest, cheat, blah blah. Like, I get it, but I think those deserve actually more time in their own thing to really go. And
Sure.
This is one thing that I don't think this conversation is ever going to end between Tarantino and the world.
No.
But love him or hate him, I think all of those tropes and all of the reasons why and all the style and all the dialogue and all the Tarantino isms are on full display in this film.
He's entertaining. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and so it was interesting to revisit. And again, like, if it's up to me, like, that's just my nostalgia. My Kermit the Frog is Charles Manson. So because he's Kermit and Miss Piggy rolled an animal rolled all into one. So I will fucking return to Charles Manson and recommend you to watch some weird shit at some point in the future. From there, we moved on to episode 233. Rutger Hauer died. So we talked about those performances. Blade Runner, obviously, being the main one. Peter Fonda died, so we talked about that. Going back to Easy Rider, 1969, versus, the Limey from 99. So you have the 69 Easy Rider, the Limey in 99, and he dies in 2019. So then there was a period where you were really hitting the noir. You did Detour.
Great movie.
The Setup. Where the Sidewalk Ends. Kiss of Death. So you were really, like, exploring for a while that the noir.
And it's a genre that I'm going to go back to because there are nuances there that as you get older you start to see, and I'm gonna be interested in comparing my younger viewings to my older ones. I like losers. I just fucking love stories of losers. The darkness of the world that they live in, the compromises that they find themselves forced to make. People with their backs against the wall that want to win one time in their life, and the beauty of noir is every once in a while it works out badly. It doesn't end well, and there's definitely the Hays Code that saved some of these characters and to my mind, hurt the films. But like with Detour, with Ulmer's Detour, my God, I don't know that you've ever seen a femme fatale as bad as the Anne. God, I can't remember her name. Anne Savage's character in that film. She's a fucking horrible human being in a much different, less captivating way than Barbara Stanwyck is. And Barbara Stanwyck is the I guess Barbara Stanwyck is the gold standard of femme fatale. But my God, and if you've never seen Detour, you really owe it to yourself. The setup is a great film. But Detour is one of those ones where it's like, I didn't even know something like this existed. And my God, watching it, I was really blown away. Just talking about right now means that I have to put it on a list of things to watch within the next couple of weeks, because sometimes you're excited to go back and revisit something, you know? That's one that that's a trip I want to go back to.
Episode 240, I was out of the country, and he pissed me off. He did Rambo without me.
I told you, I asked you, I've always asked you, do you want to fucking save these or not? And I would have loved to talk this with you, because I could hear, it's weird, I was doing the episode and I could hear you in my head, parrying and jabbing with me on this one, because this is actually one that we should go back to, because I know that the majority of people out there look at the Rambo series as this great case of Americana, patriotic, just this is like a theme song to us. And as I watched each film, and I really like First Blood. I think First Blood is actually a pretty good B-movie, dirty little ugly film. And First Blood Part 2, Rambo, is just jingoistic garbage. Rambo 3 is an embarrassment. Rambo fights with the Taliban, which is a beautiful little hiccup in cinematic history. Rambo was a great time.
It was good. I mean, you have to look at it.
No, in the context of the times,
we're looking at it. Yeah. I mean, this is like going against Russia. You know what I mean? Like, the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, and it was like, well.
But that's one of the elements where you can humanize something as a means to an end. And then how quickly you are able to turn on it when the fight becomes a different thing. Okay, now the Russians are out and the Afghanis want their independence or whatever the fuck is going on over there. You're telling me that the human rights violations against women weren't happening during the Rambo movie? I mean, the point I'm making is that it's easy to ignore that which does not serve our interests.
Of course.
And that's the thing about that movie. But by the time you get to the last film, Last Blood, I mean, the 2008 film is just ridiculous. It's like the fourth Die Hard movie. It's just so gonzo, out of its mind, unrealistic, moronic, but fun, really fun. Last Blood, I just thought was... Did you see Last Blood? Did you see the final Rambo film? Going into Mexico?
No, I haven't seen that one. That one had been from that same year.
Yeah. It's a horrible film.
I was out of the fucking country.
Yeah.
And even like from going back to the Taliban aspect, technically, I don't even think as we know the Taliban, I don't even think it existed at that point in the 80s, because there were different factions in Afghanistan and different like cultural groups that were making coalitions to fight against the Soviets. So even then, it's kind of like looking back on it through our lens, it's even not accurate
Mm-hmm.
to just put that tag on it. You know what I mean? Like that's what we think, but it's like not not every group of fighters in Afghanistan was Taliban.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like so it's very complex, but we have talked about because everything connects. We've talked about the Rambo. I mean, we just did Rocky not too long ago. And so we talked about aspects of that because it parallels Stallone's work and his kind of like Americana propaganda shit, like works parallel from Rambo to Rocky. And I know we must have talked about Rambo in the context of 80s action when we were talking about the films that define their decades.
Yeah. There was all of that, but I think, and I remember this distinctly, the thing that drew me to the Rambo film as an episode discussion, and I really wish I had waited, which means that I want to do it again subsequently, was we had just seen The Birth of a Nation. And I had never sat through the entire thing. I had never watched it from beginning to end. And I remember telling you how funny I thought it was. In my sick and dark humor way of looking at something like that, I think Birth of a Nation is one of the funniest, most ridiculous things I've ever seen.
Yeah, because it's so stupid.
Because it is moronic, yeah. But as that movie went on, I saw the power that cinema had, and it's fucking ridiculous that I wouldn't realize it until this. But the level of mob, of creating a mob mentality, and building the Ku Klux Klan into heroes, the way that movie did, I couldn't help but watch Rambo and see the power of propaganda for this jingoistic. And I've been reading a book about Vietnam right now, and since that episode, Ken Burns put out his, I think, 7-part documentary on the Vietnam War, which is the first time that in a documentary that I know of that the actual Vietnamese military were interviewed and paralleled with American. It's always told from the American point of view. You never hear the Vietnamese. And it's really troubling. So when you know the story a little bit better and you know what is going on with it, it's hard to watch Rambo and not get this sense, especially the second film. It's hard to watch it and not get this sense of creating an enemy, creating a slimy little buck-toothed yellow enemy that we can hate. And
yeah, I mean, yeah, you know, it's propaganda.
Yeah.
At that point, that's what that is.
But that makes you. But the point is that it forces you to examine the psychological aspect of what drives that narrative in your head. What is it? The point I'm making is that I realized how easy it is to use something like cinema to manipulate and to drive home a point. And that was the first time that it scared the shit out of me. That really scared me. Watching it really scared me because I also remembered Rambo First Blood Part 2 was like 83, I think. Rambo was 81. No, First Blood was 81. Rambo was 82 or 83. God, I was a fucking kid. And they marketed it to us. There was a Rambo cartoon, for Christ's sake. You know? This shit is designed to control your mind. So there needs to be a literacy, yeah.
This is what They Live comments on. This is what Videodrome comments on. This is to an extent what The Matrix comments on. And the problem is that then you can use those metaphors but to also control people. You can say, well, what you need to do is you need to take the red pill so you can see the world as it actually is.
Yeah.
But what I'm not going to tell you is that I'm controlling the narrative of what the red pill is. I'm just using this metaphor from the Matrix, so you know exactly what I'm saying, but I'm going to tell you what the red pill means. And now you take the red pill and it's like, oh, women are fucking bitches because they won't sleep with me. Now I'm fucking red pill that I understand the way the world really works. Fuck women. I'm a fucking incel. You know what I mean? Like, or that's fake news. And you call everything that you disagree with fake news. And then you basically say, well, I'm going to lie to everyone. But anytime anyone tells the truth, I'm going to say it's a lie. But I'm lying. Or you say, I'm going to be racist. And anytime anyone describes racism, I'm going to say that they're being racist. But just by describing racism, I'm going to say that they're being racist. And whenever someone says Black Lives Matter, because it really means that the people saying it they're talking about how it seems as though Black lives don't matter because of the amount of the rates at which Black men are getting killed in this country, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to say all lives matter because that sounds reasonable. Because obviously, supposedly, to these people, all lives do matter, even though to me, they don't because I'm racist and Black lives don't matter. And I'm going to say I'm pro-life, even though I don't give a fuck about poor people. And I don't give a fuck about evangelicals. I just want their vote, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's propaganda. And going back to Anthony Bourdain, he, I don't know if it was in one of his shows or if it was in one of his books or both, but he describes, and it's not like he's the first one to do it. I'm just connecting these two things. It's like he's quick to point out that what do the Vietnamese call the Vietnamese War? The American War.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's not one-sided. There's a perspective here. So, and in the process of moving through this year of 2019, we skipped over. Here we described it as Rock and Roll Cinema Part 1 yesterday, today, which is the Danny Boyle film called Yesterday. And I think
God, that was Danny Boyle, wasn't it? Wow.
Yeah, and I don't, maybe we talked. I don't know if I think I touched on it last time, but yeah, the idea of like what would happen. I'm changing the subject, but it's connected because it's all connected. Where it's like what would happen in a world where the Beatles never existed, but this person still remembers the parallel universe from before he got hit by a bus or something, and so he wakes up and everything is the same except in the external world the Beatles never existed. That's the only thing. And so because of them, like Harry Potter never existed because his look is influenced by them, etc. So then he goes on to, because he's a musician, so he tries to remember all of their songs, the chord progressions, basically the melodies, the chords, and the lyrics. He becomes famous, and of course he's using television, he's using all the apparatus of media to further his career, using the Beatles material. And so that's his campaign, and we're talking about media. And people are all, it's not Beatlemania, but it's a version of he becomes famous. But then there are people who remember. There are like those who do remember, it's like a handful of people, and they're like, "You didn't fucking write this."
No, you're making it sound like they're angry. They weren't. Do you remember the movie?
I clearly remember the movie.
They were thankful,
but they do confront him about not having written it.
Yeah, but they weren't like, "No, motherfucker, you didn't write this." But they were like, "No, you didn't write this. But thank you for introducing it to people."
Thank you
because that's the point, was
characterizing my tone and reframing what I'm saying to suit what you remember, because obviously I don't.
You don't remember that?
That was sarcasm.
Okay.
Yes, I remember the movie.
Okay.
But they do confront him in the beginning from the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wait a minute, you didn't write this.
Yeah.
Then they get together, and it's kind of, and I remember at the time that it's like, him doing these renditions of these songs, it's like, it's not the same.
No.
It's not the fucking same. And even though he had the media apparatus behind him, he had the producers, he had the fucking TV, he had all of these things that we were just describing that can be used for propagandistic purposes, right? To push the narrative, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, and we all do it. I mean, like, you're pushing your narrative about the movie, and I'm pushing mine.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not even, it's lies agreed upon, going back to Milk. It's not even that we're saying that things were different. It's just kind of like, well, they didn't say, you didn't write this. They said, you didn't write this. See the difference?
Mm-hmm.
Ibrahim? You know what I mean? So we have to go back to the TV to tell us what the truth is. How is that going to work out for us? You know what I mean? So from there, we moved into going back to the Joker. We moved into Todd Phillips's Joker and Martin Scorsese's King of Comedy. So now we're into Joaquin Phoenix, and now we're waiting for Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga. But this was looking back at elements of Scorsese's work and how it influenced the Joker film, and that version of Gotham City, and that version of that latest, at that point, the latest version of who the Joker was or how he was portrayed, and very interestingly by Joaquin Phoenix, to have the laugh be this condition, and it's like this curse, and then we kind of got into it because it was like, well, you didn't believe that, you didn't buy it, that it was like that this guy could run an empire,
mm-hmm.
And I was just like, I don't think it's really about the guy. I think it's more like the role, and you can just substitute people in and out of the Joker, and you can have just sort of variations of it. So I wasn't literally like tied to this. It's like, I don't give a fuck like about how the Joker manages his money or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's about the figurehead. For me, it's looking at the Joker as what the Joker represents, rather than can the Joker like balance the fucking checkbook so he has enough money to do terrorist attacks. You know what I mean? Like, the Joker doesn't have to exist as a person in order to. It's like that group Anonymous. Like, who's the leader of Anonymous?
Yeah.
Or is it just, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there's more to come with the Joker. That's not going to go away anytime soon. We did episode 242. We Taxi Driver and Bringing Out the Dead. Scorsese and Paul Schrader.
Are we teaming after over a decade? Yeah, because they hadn't worked together since Last Temptation of Christ.
Yeah. So I mean, that's stuff that's like we're not going to see anytime soon. Stuff on that level.
No.
That's
well, both directors in their late 70s. Scorsese might be in his 80s by now. It's weird. You every year that goes by, every decade that moves on, there's a cultural shift. There's a artistic shift, because those that once ruled the artistic canon of cinema or literature or whatever, they get old, they pass on, and the question becomes who's going to take the place, who's going to create, and what direction is the art going to go. Now, when you have Scorsese and Schrader coming together, it's, with Taxi Driver, that's a perfect storm of brilliance. Scorsese, De Niro, Schrader, all coming together to tell this story, which is arguably one of the best films of the 1970s, maybe the best film. I know you and I could go back and forth. We could argue that, and I don't make that as any kind of definitive statement. Apocalypse is
Sure.
there. The Godfather is there. The Conversation is there. I mean, there's a lot of films that could contend for that title, but I don't know.
That's interesting. Even just bringing up sorry to cut you off, but even just bringing up the conversation, like how many people have even seen The Conversation?
Nobody has seen The Conversation. Like, nobody knows that film. Yeah, nobody. Very few people our age and much fewer younger than us have ever seen that film or even know that film. I mean, but also Robert De Niro is seen as kind of a crazy man at this point, a loudmouth crazy man who with a Trump chip on his shoulder. People are vaguely aware of the Jake LaMotta, the Travis Bickle, these characters, but who the fuck knows who Gene Hackman is anymore? And that pains me to say that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, and I say it realistically. It's like if I were to talk to people at work and bring up Gene Hackman, they would be like, "Well, can you tell me who he is? What did he do?"
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, and that fucks with me. I mean, I'm like, who the fuck? Unforgiven. Is that old guy who used to shoot people?
Oh my god!
You make me want to shoot you right now. It's just like fuck the level of illiteracy in this world that we live in, and that's the good thing bad thing about this show is that at the very least I get to talk to somebody who is as literate as I am about the medium, but also educated in other aspects that maybe I'm not, and vice versa. But at least there's an openness to understand certain things. And I think that the people who listen to these episodes, the people who donate to us, the people who go to buymeacoffee.com/watchRickRamos, who give of themselves. You like that, didn't you? Would have been smoother if you hadn't said anything, you little prick.
I have to say it because it's not that fucking smooth.
It was smooth for me. Those people who do contribute, they see the value and they enjoy that. But at the same time, it just amplifies the understanding of how many people don't. And they have no idea who these people are outside of whoever's on their I don't know, their fucking Netflix series, whatever they're watching, whatever the fuck anybody is watching it. But I really don't know what people are watching any longer.
They're glancing. I don't know. I mean, like,
Yeah,
it's
that's
like
a good way to
watching,
describe it.
like they're scrolling.
Yeah.
Motherfuckers are scrolling. I mean, there are those people who, yes, they are watching, but
Yeah.
but it's like the vast majority of society is we're a scrolling society now. We're a nation of scrollers.
And that's the sad thing, because I think these like a movie like Taxi Driver and Bringing Out the Dead are more important today than possibly what they were in 76 and 99. I think both of those movies,
I don't know.
you don't. I think if people were to watch them today with an open mind, you know, huh?
I have a hard time. I mean, it was made out of the anxieties and
Yes.
the pressures of those times. So I think it's there's something that it's going to be connected completely. Like, you know, I mean, I could say, you know, last time we were talking about Kurt Cobain, and say, well, does you know, does the fact that Roe v. Wade was overturned, like, does that make in utero fucking like that much more powerful? And I don't know. I mean, it's always it's looking back. It's you know, can we say that male anxiety around childbirth and around babies and all, and fatherhood and all this sort of shit, like, is that part, or is A Handmaid's Tale like, okay, that's a better one, like something like that, where it's like something there's a parallel to the subject matter. Is it more relevant today than then? More relevant? No, I just think it's kind of like, on some level, some shit is always relevant because we're always fighting those battles.
Well, more relevant might be the wrong description. It probably is the wrong description, but there's something to say. There's something to be said about how the culture doesn't really change. The characters do, but we're basically doing Shakespeare right now with a different cast, and the story is the same. And I don't see, you know, to paraphrase and expand on Paul Schrader's, when you get rid of Crime and Punishment, you don't get rid of Raskolnikov.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And you know, I'm bastardizing this quote, but the truth is that as the decades go on, Raskolnikov is still there. Travis Bickle is still there. And now we have these guys marching, Jews will not replace us, with their fucking tiki torches, and supporting a candidate who is woefully underqualified for the office that he's going for. But is able
qualified for the dictatorship that he pursues.
Yeah. That's the craziness of it. That's for me what I mean when I say it's more relevant today, because, you know, I mean, I can defend this shit in different ways based on how I want to manipulate it, as everybody can to some degree. But the fact, let's face it, the only thing that is relevant to a people are what is going on and occurring now to them. Now, if they can watch Travis Bickle, the problem is that the person who watches Taxi Driver is either going to see it for the horror show that it is and a cautionary tale, or they're going to look at it and say, Jesus Christ, that's a guy just like me. I get him. He gets me. And you're like, oh, fuck, this motherfucker's waiting for the rain to come. Fuck. Which is scary.
Yeah, I mean, like,
which is very scary.
Yeah, I mean, he becomes a hero.
Yeah.
And he becomes a hero because of the media.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's easy to say, well, mainstream media is, you know, and at some point we're going to talk about network. And it's easy to say, well, that's why I don't do mainstream media. That's why I listen to fucking Joe Rogan. Like, that's how I learn about life, you know?
That's where I get my truth.
TikTok.
Yeah. Or the great Alex Jones many a year ago.
You're all right. And we've seen what happened with that. And we saw him on Joe, or Piers Morgan, or fucking Patrick Bet David or Jordan Peterson or Lex Friedman or any of these fucking crypto fucking fascists, you know? And I mean, that's an extreme kind of thing that I don't think all those people I mentioned are exactly that, but I'm being cute. But the point is that, yeah, it's like another one was, I saw it on Instagram. It was describing the current political situation as like, we either, if these two candidates were movies, it's like either we vote in American Psycho or Weekend at Bernie's.
I saw that.
And it's like, God damn.
Yeah.
So, and even like one out of two of those is an obscure reference by today's standards.
Shit, both of them.
If anyone knows about, yeah, right, exactly. So God's Lonely Man. We move on. We did an episode on Dolomite Is My Name and Ed Wood.
It's crazy because I was watching Dolomite Is My Name last night. I was just flipping through Netflix and I was like, oh, I haven't seen this in a while. Because Eddie Murphy just rebooted Beverly Hills Cop, which was just fucking unnecessary if you watch it. And I was watching Dolomite, at least the last part of it.
What do you mean he rebooted it? What does that mean?
They just did a fourth Beverly Hills Cop movie. And
is it out?
It's on Netflix. It's on Netflix. Okay. They had been trying to reboot this thing for fucking a decade now. And Murphy wanted to play the role. So they created this fucking little story of him having a daughter who's a civil rights attorney, I guess, or something in Beverly Hills, and he has to come and save the day. It's a lot of bullshit. It's just not that interesting. And I look and I kind of feel bad for the Eddie Murphy that I grew up with. When I say I feel bad, it's like I feel bad on the films that we lost, because he was a fucking powerhouse and he was dangerous. And was if you go back and you watch 48 Hours, beyond just the racist elements of the film, and I don't think the film is racist. I think, but the language is definitely racist, and the characters are racist. But I argue that that's the way people talked, and that's the way they. I don't think it was. I don't think it was gratuitous in any way during that film. You'd have to watch the film. We've been talking about doing that film for a long time. I don't know when the last time you saw it was, but I think it's like a cold pail of water to the face to hear how fucking ridiculously brutal the language is in that film. Anyway, Dolomite, I was watching it and I was just like, I've been having a little bit of a hard time at work, and that movie kind of inspired me to take the art seriously and to invest more of myself in what you create. It sounds stupid, but the Rudy Ray Moore story is a fascinating one, because here's a guy who supposedly didn't have the talent necessary, and there's a lot of jokes at his expense in the film, but there's a tangible element of the fight and the belief in himself and the desire to create something. And it really made me feel good. I mean, and that's what I felt the first time I saw it. Number one, it's a funny movie, but more importantly, it's a really inspiring movie. I think it's some of Murphy's best work and I think it's the kind of film that he should be doing. I think that's the kind of film that he should be making at this point in his career. And then when you parallel that with, from the same writers, Scott Alexander and Larry Kraszewski, I think are their names, they're writing the Ed Wood story. And this, again, a guy woefully untalented, and yet able to make these films out of sheer perseverance, out of the desire to do, and not even to be famous, is that to actually leave an imprint. I think both of those films are fabulous, and I if I'm not mistaken, I think Dolomite Is My Name was one of the best films I saw that year. I liked it that much. Yeah.
From there, you went
Noir again.
You did, yeah. You did Night in the City, The Naked City, and Brute Force.
Great films.
We went into The Irishman and Hoffa.
Irishman, my best birthday as an adult, I think. Going to see that.
Egyptian.
Yeah, the Egyptian, steak dinner afterwards. And just, I thought it would probably be the last Scorsese film I would see. I didn't realize that he was going to make Killers of the Flower Moon. I didn't realize that was going to be as good as it was. But I was really, the de-aging notwithstanding, it's a great film. It really is a well-made, beautifully told story. And when you contrast it with Danny DeVito's take on the Hoffa mythology, the grandness of this story, I think both of them do an incredible job servicing this misunderstood character in American history. I think he comes off worse in Scorsese's film, and he comes off as a fucking folk hero in Danny DeVito's film, and I think somewhere in the middle is the truth. I don't know what the real Hoffa was, but like we've said before, I've emphasized, you don't go to movies for historical truth.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you don't go to presidential elections for fucking leaders. You go for characters.
Wow, I'm amazed that horse still walks. You beat it so badly.
That shit will outlive us all.
Yeah, it will.
I mean, that's just beating me. I'm its whore.
Oh my god.
I mean, to see, and the thing before we move on is it's like it's to see De Niro, Pacino, Keitel, and
Joe Pesci.
And Joe Pesci,
all under the guidance of Martin Scorsese film. All under the Martin. Let's not forget that. Yeah,
of course. I mean, so it's kind of like that's fucking cool to see that.
That was incredible.
And Joe Pesci was kind of like he was the one, and someone described his work as a revelation or something like that. I remember that being a headline or being something, but it was it was a very big deal. And so that was great. From there, we went into Errol Morris's American Dharma documentary about Steve Bannon.
Well, we finished out the month with documentaries. Yeah.
Fucking Steve Bannon, who is now in jail.
Is he?
Yeah, he's in jail.
I haven't been paying attention. I thought he was just up for trial. Good. Fuck him. I hope he stays there.
In jail for a few months. And I mean, all of these, so many of these people around Trump have been pardoned and fucking found guilty and all this other shit. So it's it was on his show recently. Obviously, he's in jail, so there was a substitute host, but one of the main heads of the fucking Project 2025, which, if you haven't heard of Project 25, as Taraji P. Henson says, look it up. Fucking look it up and be afraid.
Yeah.
He says that, I'm paraphrasing, but he said this is going to be the second American Revolution, and it'll be a bloodless revolution if the left allows it to be.
Well, that's pretty, yikes.
Yeah, that's pretty chilling, right? And so Steve Bannon, campaign strategist, worked with Breitbart, this old right-wing media shit. It really gets to kind of like some of the minds that really took advantage of the Donald Trump phenomenon. And people who really said, hey, this guy can take us where we need to go, because they want to bring this shit down. They want to bring down the fucking current government apparatus and rebuild. And they weren't ready for him to win in 2016. And since then, the right has worked, Heritage Foundation, other groups. Their plan is to, and now this sounds crazy, but it's like the Project 2025 exists. It's there. It's a manifesto. It's about almost 1,000 pages long. It's detailed in what the plan is for the reclassifying of government workers who are non-political, but their job is basically like public facing. So EPA, different agencies that just work basically to protect Americans and to have certain standards, federal standards of operation for environment, etc. All those things are going to be fucking gutted. These employees in their place, it'll be loyalists. Now, because of the Supreme Court, any president under official acts has immunity, which means that even if in the unofficial acts you can't use any so-called like evidence that relates to official acts, you can't use any of that evidence to prove unofficial acts. So we have a right-wing radicalized fucking January 6th flag flying, upside down flag flying Supreme Court. We're on track to potentially lose both parts of Congress, and there's now an effort to concentrate power in the executive branch. The FBI would fall under the president. In this case, it would be Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Steve Bannon has said this from day one. This is turning into a fucking rant, but this is related to, because this is kind of like we're in this Trump era in this time when it's like a lot of the stuff that we're doing had to do with Donald Trump. Some stuff overtly, some stuff not. Steve Bannon said the Democrats are stupid. Like, they're trying to like be good, and we just go for the headshot. And that's the problem that we're facing, that the country is facing at this point. And Steve Bannon is kind of like reflecting that truth. It's kind of like, what does the Democratic Party do to kind of like save the system and save potentially democracy itself, versus the Republicans are strategic and they don't give a fuck. They just want to win. It's an interesting documentary, American Dharma. Errol Morris really gets to the heart of Steve Bannon with his fucking greasy ass hair, multiple shirts piled on top of each other, and his admiration for German engineering of concentration camps.
Well, he's an all-around sweet guy,
For sure.
You don't find that kind of. It's a miracle to me that I grew up in a generation where you had to hide that. The Pat Buchanans and all those guys really had to hide their violent and very extreme right-wing attitudes. And now we live in a time where Donald Trump and Steve Bannon can just go out there and be who they are, as blatantly fucking racist, misogynistic, homophobic, and it's disturbing. It's incredibly disturbing.
Yeah. So from there we went into
Robert Evans.
Kid stays in the picture.
That was the first time that we ever did an episode where I was like, you know what, I have to, and I don't like audible books. I don't like shit being read to me. Yeah. But watching that fucking documentary told me I had to listen to this autobiography, and I loved every second of it. My God, what a fucking ridiculous human being. That was fucking great. Just to listen. Did we do an episode earlier or later on about Wag the Dog? I can't remember, but
I don't even know if we've done an episode on Wag the Dog.
Yeah, we did an episode on Wag the Dog. I know we did. Maybe during the election or something. I don't remember, but I bring it up because as much as you might enjoy Dustin Hoffman's performance in that film, because it's so fucking ridiculous. We might have just talked about it. You might have a good point there. As ridiculous and as enjoyable and as a good time as Dustin Hoffman is in that film, if you've actually seen Robert Evans, it amps it up to a whole other level. And when you watch The Kid Stayed in the Picture, for whatever you want to say about him, and he did manage to shepherd a handful of great films through the studio system. I don't know how good an artist he was. To hear him say it, The Godfather is a great film because of him.
Baby, I made that picture.
Yeah, he wanted to taste the spaghetti. It was fucking ridiculous. But that's a good time. Yeah. And then when you hear
this is the society where it's like characters like that, it would people would embrace.
Yeah.
Because he's just the crazier, the more personality you have, that's who you embrace. It becomes the WWF. It's like either you have to have a gimmick, you have to have a look, you have to have a sound, you have to have a good song, and you have to have a moment where you enter and it's like, who the fuck is that? Oh shit, and then he just ran away. Who the fuck was that? It's branding, it's fucking personality, it's imaging, it's all of that, and it's they don't make, it's like they say, they don't make people like that anymore. Obviously they do, but it's kind of like, this is why people follow the people they follow. There's so much of it that it's cult of personality.
Well, don't they say if there had been no Robert Evans, we would have had to create him? But I think we might have created him because I don't know.
I mean, sure.
Yeah. It's a good time, and you should take a listen to the episode and see the movie if you get a chance. I know Keenan and Loper put out a good Blu-ray of it a few years back. After that, we went into Remembering Roger Ebert with Steve. Oh God, Steve James's Life Itself, I think was the name of the film, and I mean, I speak to the power and the influence of Roger Ebert many times in this podcast, and I do so respectfully. I mean, I didn't agree with the man on a lot of films. I didn't agree with him on a lot of his stances and his beliefs, but at the time, there was nobody out there talking intelligently on television specifically about movies. You did have Meet the Press, you did have political shows and the news, but you didn't have somebody talking arts with the passion and the vigor that he and Gene Siskel did for over 20 years. I still value that. I remember being a fucking nerd kid looking for, in Arizona at least, it jumped all over the stations. It was a PBS show, then it was a UHF show. It might have been on Channel 15, it might have been on Channel 5. It was on late at night. It was on middays on Sunday. I mean, it took a lot to figure out when the fuck this show was on. But I always knew that I was going to hear good conversation that was filled with love for the medium. And when they went at it, it was even better. So for me, it was the what do you call it? It was an embracing of intelligent television, which at that time was very rare. So I was a big fan. I was a big fan of Roger Ebert.
Yeah, it was good. It was good to see them
go at
disagree. And now we get to live that dream ourselves.
Yeah.
On a much smaller, more pathetic scale.
Yeah.
The death of a film commentator is a good place to end this episode today. Next episode, we're going to go into some scary places. So let's put a pause on this and continue next time. This episode, like all of the episodes of this series, is a remembrance. And so this is going to all of our listeners who ride with us, watch with us, also donate to us, help us keep the lights on and keep us caffeinated. Watch this with RickRamos. buymeacoffee.com/watchRickRamos. buymeacoffee.com/watchRickRamos. This goes to all of you. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Tune in. Watch this.